Well, I want to begin the programme with two stark statistics. As I was saying, the global death toll from COVID-19 has now passed 500,000. The number of infections has passed 10 million. And I'm afraid we're told this is only the start. Here's more from the World Health Organization.
The hard reality is this is not even close to being over. Although many countries have made some progress, globally, the pandemic is actually speeding up.
Well, there are many ways to illustrate the severity of the pandemic. Here's one. This is from Reuters, showing us that in June, more than 4,700 people died every 24 hours from COVID-19 linked illness. That's one death every 18 seconds, or nearly 200 deaths every hour. And America remains the worst affected country by far. It has the most deaths, the most infections, 125,000 and 2.5 million respectively. This graph tells us that the new infection rates are being fueled by outbreaks in the west and the south of the US. Two states, South Carolina and Nevada, saw their highest daily infection figure over the weekend. And because of these kind of figures, some states are tightening restrictions. Here's the governor of Texas speaking on Sunday.
Well, we need to understand that COVID-19 has taken a very swift and very dangerous turn in Texas over just the past few weeks.
This is what the governor is referring to. The number of daily cases in Texas has jumped from 2,000 to over 5,000. Texas has recorded over 150,000 cases in total. But go back 2 months when the state began reopening, that figure was around 30,000. Well, now restrictions are coming back. These bars were told to close on Friday. Restaurants have been told to cut their dining capacity, and public gatherings are now limited to under 100 people. As you may have seen there, Vice President Mike Pence was in Texas over the weekend, Dallas to be precise. He promised more testing kits, and he had this advice.
Wear a mask wherever it's indicated, or wherever you're not able to practice the kind of social distancing that would prevent the spread of the coronavirus. And we would strongly reiterate that today. I know that roughly half the state is under local ordinances. Strongly recommend if your local officials in consultation with the state are directing you to wear a mask, we encourage everyone to wear a mask.
Now remember that while the US authorities advise mask wearing, President Trump refuses to wear one. Now let's switch from Texas to California. It too has had to bring back some restrictions. The announcement came via a tweet from the governor saying bars closing in 7 counties and bars outside those areas have also been advised to shut. And he released a statement as well saying COVID-19 is still circulating in California and in some parts of the state growing stronger. Well, that's certainly the case for Los Angeles. It's seen a big surge in infections. The LA Times is reporting nearly 100,000 recorded infections in total. That's far more than anywhere else in California. Similar story is playing out on the opposite coast. Here are Florida's statistics. Saturday brought a new record for a daily number of infections, and the surge in cases brings the total to over 140,000. Now, of course, there are many questions about why this is happening now. One theory, for Florida at least, was that there was a rush to socialize. The New York Times reports many people have had enough of staying inside, feeling trapped and scared. As fear subsided, coronavirus grew. And this is important too. Florida state officials say the average age of people being infected is now 36. Compare that with 2 months ago, that same figure was 65. And it's certainly true that when Florida reopened, people rushed to the beaches. This was Miami a couple of weeks ago. These beaches have now been ordered to close for the July the 4th celebrations, and statewide alcohol sales are already banned, and that will continue towards the holiday weekend. One argument being made by Florida's governor is that the high number of cases we're seeing in the state are connected to the high rate of testing. These kind of mobile clinics are certainly in demand. This is Jacksonville, Florida. But bear in mind, the argument that the testing is the cause of the surging numbers was widely criticised when President Trump made it last weekend. Well, let's bring in BBC Monitoring's Luis Fajardo, who's live with us in Miami. Luis, tell us more about how many restrictions will be returned in Florida.
Ross, there certainly has been a change in the tone from the authorities. The state governor has suspended plans to continue reopening the economy. However, controversially, he still has not ordered a statewide requirement to wear masks. He has left that to individual cities, to individual counties. And many of them have. For example, in Miami-Dade, there is now, in Miami where I am, there is now an order to wear masks. Also very controversially in Jacksonville, which, as you know, is going to be the site of the Republican National Convention final night later on in the summer. So it is clearly a situation that changes across the state. But still, I would say that most authorities, most lawyers now in Florida, have realized the seriousness of the situation. And although only a few weeks ago they were describing the situation as improving continuously, now they are demanding a lot of caution from citizens. And I would say that citizens are starting to move in that direction as well.
And Luis, presumably tourism's a huge factor for Florida, and understandably lots of people in the state need the tourists to keep their jobs afloat.
Certainly, that's one of the things that Governor Ron DeSantis argued when he was calling for a reopening of the state only a few weeks ago. Something like 130 million tourists visit every year Florida. They're responsible for nearly more than 1 million jobs in Florida. So it is a huge industry, of course. And a lot of people were making the argument that it was indispensable for Florida's economic stability to reopen as soon as possible. Of course, the governor was also promoting the state of Florida as a site for many events that were not going to be able to occur elsewhere in the country. For example, the professional basketball tournament, the NBA, which is due to happen later on in Orlando. So a great deal of economic issues around tourism in Florida, which for some of his critics explain why the governor was so eager to open the state.
Luis, as ever, thank you very much for your help. Now, let's move away from the US and look at countries which have controlled the virus to a large degree but continue to face localised outbreaks. For example, in mid-June, China had a spike of new cases in Beijing after almost 2 months without any. Well, we know the government is willing to reintroduce local lockdowns to deal with these kind of outbreaks. We've seen that again on Sunday with the reinstatement of a lockdown in one county south of Beijing. This is going to affect around 400,000 people. Officials say the county will be fully enclosed and controlled. Now, bear in mind, this particular county only has 18 confirmed cases from the last 2 weeks, but because it's close to Beijing, evidently the authorities are taking no chances. Next, we switch from China to Germany. Authorities there have extended a lockdown in and around the city of Gütersloh. Now, this is all connected to an outbreak we've talked about before. It affected thousands of people. It's linked to this meat processing factory. And this is the first example of a lockdown, a local lockdown, since Germany's nationwide lockdown lifted in early May. We saw this article in the Daily Telegraph, suggesting accurately, I think, that lots of people are looking to Germany's reaction to these situations as a possible template for how we shape what it calls the new normal. Our health correspondent Nick Triggle puts it this way: we should get used to these local flare-ups. They're going to become a way of life over the coming months, Nick says. Which brings us to the UK. Its new infection rate is not as low as China's or Germany's, and local lockdowns are already being considered. For example, pubs and restaurants in Leicester may stay closed for 2 more weeks due to a surge in cases there. Here's the Prime Minister on this, speaking a little bit earlier.
We are not out of the woods yet. It's very important. We're making these cautious, calibrated steps. We're opening as much of hospitality as we can on July the 4th, opening as much of the economy as we can. Some things, alas, still remain, closed until they can become COVID secure. But to make all that possible, we have to remain vigilant. We have to continue to do the basics, washing our hands and all that. Plus, we need to have local lockdowns and local whack-a-mole strategies where that's necessary.
Well, the government's health secretary has been talking to officials this afternoon. We're expecting an update on the situation in Leicester in the next hour. Now, despite local flare-ups, countries all over the world are feeling their way to something at least a little bit closer to normal life. In many cases, that includes being able to travel again. The UK, for example, plans to create what it's calling air bridges or travel corridors with a number of countries. We're expecting more details on which countries later this week. But this would mean people travelling to and from the UK to these countries without having to quarantine for 2 weeks. Here's the BBC's transport correspondent, Tom Burridge.
The government plans to have this traffic light system, so countries will be rated either green, amber or red. Green will mean that the infection rate of the virus is significantly lower than here in the UK. Amber will mean that there's a similar dynamic of the virus in that country to the UK, but it will mean that you won't have to self-isolate for 14 days after you return from an amber country, but people travelling in from a red country will be subject to the quarantine rules. Now, in terms of exactly which countries, we'll find out on Wednesday. But if you look at this list of countries, a lot of European countries will be on that list. We're expecting most of these countries to be on the list. Certainly countries like Spain, France, Italy, big holiday destinations are almost certain to be on the list.
Now, you'll have noticed on Tom's list was Greece, but we'll have to see if that holds, because earlier on it was announced by the Greek government that there's going to be a ban on all flights from the UK and Sweden, which will be extended to July the 15th because of the severity of the outbreaks in those two countries. So clearly, this is not going to be a consistent reopening across Europe for the travel industry. Nonetheless, for many destinations, it's definitely time to prepare for visitors in the next few weeks. One of them is the Spanish resort town of Torremolinos. Damien Grammaticus is there.
They will find at the airport there is no need to do quarantine here. Spain lifted that a week ago. All you will have to do is go through a temperature check and fill out your travel details for the past few days and the coming few days. When you get here then, you'll find on the beaches, they're open, they're ready. The sun loungers have been spaced apart. There are wardens on the beach keeping social distancing here. In the hotels, I have to say many of them are not open at the minute because they are waiting for those flights to resume before they will open up. And in the hotels too, many the ones that are open have procedures in place. They are limiting numbers in swimming pools. The restaurants are the same, many of them are open, but again, social distancing there. And if you go outside in Spain, you will have to wear a face mask anywhere there is people within 1.5 meters. So different rules in different countries, but everyone waiting for that announcement.